What's your favorite scary movie?
Hello. Do you want to play a game?
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
You know, it's Halloween. I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare, huh?
That the power of Christ compels you! The power of Christ compels you! The power of Christ compels you!
Here's Johnny!
I see dead people.
Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
It's showtime.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Terror Talks. I'm your host, Jeremy, and on today's episode, we are going to be talking all about Halloween Horror Nights. We're going to be talking about Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Studios Orlando and Universal Studios Hollywood as well. And we're going to be covering the version 2 of the speculation map for the events posted by our friends over at Horror Night Nightmares. As you know, this speculation map is subject to change probably another 2 or 3 times before we get any actual concrete evidence as to what we're going to see at the Horror Nights event. We'll probably get some announcements within the next, I'd say, a couple weeks. We can only hope. We have not gotten any announcements yet for Halloween Horror Nights, which is very, very strange at this point, being that in years past, at this point in time, we would have already had 1 or 2 announcements, at the very least, 1 house announcement. The only thing that we know for sure at this given time is the dates for Halloween Horror Nights in Orlando. Anyways, we don't have any information regarding the event in Hollywood just yet, but we have the dates. We know that Orlando will feature 10 terrifying haunted houses, 5 scare zones, 2 shows, and just a whole mess of horror, because that's what we've come to know and love from Halloween Horror Nights. So, like I said, at this point, nothing is 100% confirmed except for the literal bare bones skeleton, if you will, of the event. So we know what will be there. We just don't know what will be featured there just yet. And if you listen to one of our episodes prior, we covered version 1 of the speculation map, and our good friends over at the unofficial Universal Orlando podcast covered version 1 and talked about it, as well as our friends at the Theme Park Duo. You know, definitely go check both of them out. Go check out the unofficial Universal Orlando podcast, as they just released an episode about a day ago from when we're recording this episode. They did an episode covering this exact version 2 of the speculation map, so definitely go check them out. But we're going to dive right in here, look at all the houses, what's changed, what's stayed the same, maybe something has moved around, and I can promise you some things have moved around on the spec map. So let's not waste any time. Let's just dive right in. So going around the park, going around Universal Studios, we've come to our first house, which is House A, and this is rumored to be Netflix's Stranger Things. So Stranger Things was featured at the event twice before. It was featured in 2018 at Universal Studios Orlando, and they did Stranger Things 1, the first season. It was basically you walked through the first season, which was amazing. And then in 2019, the iconic franchise returned again, and they sort of did a mashup of Stranger Things 2 and 3, because I believe that year was the year that we were getting Stranger Things 3 was being released, and Stranger Things 2 had already come out, so they said, well, here, let's try to mesh the 2 together. So looking at this speculated house, I'm excited, but I'm not excited, and reason being, HHN 30 was my first year going to Horror Nights, so I never got to experience either of the Stranger Things houses for myself, which I'm gutted. I really wish I had gotten a chance to experience them, but, you know, things just didn't work out for me. I was supposed to go for HHN 29 and I would have gotten to experience Stranger Things 2 and 3 that year, but as I said, some choices were made, and I didn't end up going that year. But that being said, I did listen to many, many reviews of each of the haunts. I watched walkthroughs of both of them. You know, really got in touch with the fan base who did attend the event to just sort of hear the overall reception, and the overall reception is pretty uniform. They all said that Stranger Things 1 from 2018 was amazing, one of like the best houses ever. It felt like you were walking through the show. Universal absolutely knocked it out of the park. But then 2019, Stranger Things 2 and 3 was nowhere near as good from my understanding of it. It was not as amazing as one would have hoped. Apparently, just the overall quality just went from like this big grandeur-esque house. It went down to practically nothing. It was nowhere near as good. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, in Stranger Things 1, they had actual actors in the house playing a lot of the kids, a lot of lookalikes and such, if you will. But in 2 and 3, there was a lot more mannequins, a lot more stagnant figures, and I think that plays into it not being so exciting for fans of the series, fans of the haunt. And so for those reasons, many are not as excited about Stranger Things returning to the event this year. And my friends over at UUOP mentioned this as well. They had said, a lot of people are sort of stuck in a rut, if you will, because of that very experience. They experienced these things, and they were so looking forward to going through the haunt because the show had come out, and the hype was up. It was amazing, and then they experienced it, and that just killed the momentum. It was literally like just a nosedive. But what they said is they predict that with Stranger Things 4 coming out, for one thing, it would make sense for Netflix to want the contract to do Stranger Things 4 at the event, just because it has potential to be really, really good. There definitely will be a big grab from people on this because, we've been waiting, I think, 3 years for Stranger Things 4. We've waited a long time, and the Duffer Brothers have bragged that this is going to be one of the best seasons yet. A lot of the cast has bragged that this is going to be one of the best, scariest seasons yet. And one interesting thing I heard was that this season, Stranger Things 4, is going to be a lot more horror-esque, a lot more horror-based. And because of that, it would appear that it might lend itself even better to a Halloween Horror Nights house. So I'm excited in that regard, but because we do know about what the letdown Stranger Things 2 and 3 was during 2019, we're sort of weary to say, yeah, let's bring it back. So it's really going to be a guessing game. And once we see the show, I'm sure, hype will be back up. And I would even venture to guess that we may even see an official announcement for Stranger Things sometime after the new season has premiered. I would not be surprised in the slightest if we got that. So it's definitely a strategic move. It definitely has to do with the fact that Stranger Things 4 is finally coming out, the long-awaited season. It's supposed to be the biggest, the best, the scariest. You name it, it's supposed to be amazing. So kind of excited, kind of not. I'd be excited just for the sheer fact of I'd get to experience Stranger Things in a house and get to walk through Hawkins and the scenes from the show and all that fun stuff. So I'm sort of excited, not overly crazy, but it could still be really cool. Unfortunately, because this Netflix IP is speculated to come to the event, that means we had to lose another speculated IP from Netflix, and we'll get to that shortly. So up next, we have House B, continuing around the park, Dead Man's Wharf. Now, this is speculated to be a play on a former scare zone. I cannot quite recall what year it was at. Think it was 26. Don't quote me on that, but I will find out. I'll attach some images if you're watching the video version of this. But there was a scare zone called Fisherman's Wharf, and it was very like seaside town sort of thing. And that's actually what this was rumored to be called in version 1 of the spec map. This was Seaside Village. So it's an interesting one. I didn't get to experience that scare zone. To me, just from looking at some images and some pictures, doing some research on it, this has very much the Fog vibes to me. Undead fishermen, pirates, a seaside sort of town, a wharf, if you will. It has very much the Fog vibes of Fog-esque, a lot of pirate ships and stuff. And I think this has potential to be a really cool house. One of the things that Universal definitely doesn't tend to shy away from is water-themed houses. They had Depths of Fear back at HHN 29, and that was a whole underwater sort of house and actually featured running water, if I'm not mistaken. And then there was another house, I cannot quite remember what year it was, but it was called Dead Waters, and it was very much New Orleans riverboat zombie sort of thing. So it was on the river in the bayou kind of deal. So the water theme is something that I think Universal likes to play with and see what they can do, because water in and of itself is something we're familiar with, but it's also something that can potentially be quite terrifying. You don't know what's under the water. So this has some potential. Maybe this is their crack at a sort of pirates themed house. I had said last year when we covered Hallow Scream at SeaWorld, they had a pirate themed house there, and I absolutely loved it. I ranted and raved about it because I loved the idea of a pirate house walking through the ship and walking past the treasure and all the pirates coming out at you, and just all these different aspects of pirates. And there's just, you don't see enough pirate themed houses at events, and so I'm somewhat excited about this if it sort of went down that route. And it would be very interesting. It'd be a nice little take on a sort of pirate theme. Continuing around the map, we have C, which is Bug House. And this is where Fear Street was rumored to be. So as I said before, we gained Stranger Things. That's a Netflix IP. But it would appear that we lost the Fear Street IP, which to me is an absolute tragedy. I really, really loved Fear Street. And as I said before, though, it could play well into possibly being a scare zone still. So there is still hope for that. And when we get to the scare zones, we'll talk about that, because many of the scare zones are still unknown at this time. So I would be okay if Fear Street found its way into possibly being a scare zone. I think that could be really interesting. And maybe in the years later down the road, we might see Fear Street as an actual house. But this is rumored to be Bug House. It's an original, much like Dead Man's Wharf, an original. There's not a whole lot to go off of in terms of Bug House. I mean, could it just be a house filled with bugs, spiders, cockroaches, different insects, flies, you name it, we got it sort of deal? Could it be that? I'm not really sure. There was an interesting thing I heard from my friends, again, over at UUOP. I'll be referencing them many times throughout this episode because they had a very good conversation about it on their most recent episode. They said, what if this was like a sort of take on the old black and white monster movies that featured bugs, like the praying mantis, that sort of thing? And, that was an interesting theory. I feel like that could be really, really cool. And I'd be all for that, a house completely in black and white, the giant praying mantis, that sort of deal. I'm not sure how many bug films there are, but that could still be a really interesting sort of take on it, and could be an interesting direction. And obviously, I guess if it's an original, they would find a way to basically just do their own sort of thing with the bugs. So this could be a very fun house. The original houses are always very, very good at Universal, especially in Orlando. Last year, all the originals were my absolute favorite ones, and the IP ones were they were good too, but they weren't necessarily the ones that I was lining up to see. After I'd walked through the IP ones, I was like, that's good. Let me go do an original now. So yeah, Bug House, that is C. Continuing around the map, up next we have Universal Monsters, The Mummy versus the Wolfman. So this was on Speculation Map 1, where Stranger Things was. and now they have moved it to a different location, but it did remain. Unfortunately, with the gain of this, or I should say the movement of this, we lost what I deemed as what would have been a really cool IP house, and that was The Last of Us. Many of you know The Last of Us is a video game by Naughty Dog and Sony, and so I was very much looking forward to that idea of The Last of Us coming to the event. So I was very, very upset when I saw that it potentially could be leaving the event, and so that was very, very sad. And another good point that my friends made was, Sony is releasing The Last of Us TV show. They've pushed it back a year to 2023, I believe. And because of that, we're wondering if that could have put a hold on doing a Last of Us haunted house. And if that is the case, I get it, but I'm still absolutely devastated by that because I feel like that would have been so cool. I've always wanted to walk through it. But we still get the Mummy versus the Wolfman. As I've said before, the Universal Classic Monster houses are always so unique and so different, and so good, I might add. They're amazing. I loved the Bride of Frankenstein Lives house. I watched videos of the one in Hollywood, and I watched ours, or I walked through ours actually, and it was one of my favorite houses. The aesthetic, the set work, just everything about it was mind blown. It happened to be one of my first houses I ever got to experience for Halloween Horror Nights because I got to experience it during what was dubbed HHN Light during 2020. Everything sort of got put on hold, and they opened up the houses for a day, which I was totally cool with. I thought fantastic, and I got to experience the Bride of Frankenstein Lives, and I was just blown away by that house. I absolutely loved it. I loved Universal's take on their own creation. It was like they took the IP and said, let's put our own spin on it. So I have no doubt that they can do this same thing with the Mummy versus the Wolfman. I'm still not quite sure how the Mummy and the Wolfman go hand in hand together. It seems like an interesting pairing, but they are two very interesting monsters. So I'd be very curious to see how they do this. They've done versus houses over in Hollywood before. They've done Frankenstein versus the Wolfman. Never done the Mummy versus the Wolfman, though. So this is going to be an interesting one. I'm very curious to see where this goes. Maybe the Mummy could actually flip at some point, and it could be Frankenstein versus the Wolfman. I could see that happening, just considering the fact that that's been done before in Hollywood, and it might be something that the fans here in Florida would like to see too. I know there's several things that have been done in Hollywood that we want to see over here, and that's actually a great segue to lead us into the next original house, which is El Chupacabra, and that is replacing, again, one of my most anticipated houses from version 1, which was the Curse of Pandora's Box. I am so upset that we might not see that now, because it is one that I've basically been dying to see for a long time since I saw it at the event in Hollywood on video, of course. It was such a cool concept and such a cool house. And I just hate that there is the slightest possibility that we might not get it now, because it just was so unique. It was so original, and it was such a cool looking house. The aesthetic, again, was beautiful. It was a blacklight house. Everything was under the black light, glowing, that sort of deal. And I want to say it was probably one of the strongest original concepts done over in Hollywood. And for us to not be getting it now, at least at this stage, really, really sucks, because it would have been amazing in my opinion. So, unfortunately, we lost Pandora's Box, but we got to keep El Chupacabra, which was actually in another spot on the map, and it's just been moved now. Again, another original house. As I've said, the originals that Universal tends to do are always really, really neat, always very intriguing. So I'm very curious to see what they can do with this. I'm curious to see what we get from this. So it's going to be interesting. That's all I can say. I don't know much about the El Chupacabra folklore, the legend, I suppose it would be. I don't know a whole lot about that. And so because of that, I can't expound too much upon it. Continuing around, we've got The Horrors of Blumhouse, The Black Phone, and Freaky. So The Black Phone and Freaky are two Blumhouse picture films that came out at some point. I never saw either one of them. I believe The Black Phone had this premise of there's this black phone that rings, and if you answer it, you die or something like that. If I'm not mistaken, that I think that might be accurate to say. If I'm not, if anyone's listening, please feel free to correct me in the comments below. And then the other film is Freaky, and this was the Vince Vaughn horror film where Vince Vaughn trades bodies with this girl, and in his body, he's a serial killer. Yeah, he's a serial killer, and it swaps. So there's a girl in Vince Vaughn's body, there's a serial killer in the girl's body, and the girl goes around killing people. Again, I didn't see it. It seemed like an interesting concept, but I just don't know how that's going to translate to a Halloween Horror Nights house. I have heard that these Blumhouse haunted houses have not been the greatest when you try to mesh up these different films together. So I am weary of that. I'd rather, if we're going to have a house, let's just focus on the one. I know obviously if you mash them up, you can cash out on that, and you get to sell twice the merch because two of these things are featured at the event, sort of deal. But for me, it's not one that I'm just chomping at the bit to go see. If it's there, I'll probably go through it once or twice just to be able to say I did it and experience it and see if it's any good. But it's not one that I'm particularly excited about, and quite frankly, I kind of hope it fizzles away on the speculation map. I hope it goes away because just not my favorite, honestly. Then we have Underground Creatures. So this has remained exactly the same on both spec maps. Nothing has changed about it. The name has not changed. Everything is exactly as it was before. Again, another original concept. We don't really know anything about it. It sort of sounds like something that the host of UUOP mentioned on an episode of the Rush of Fear podcast, which is their sister podcast. Go check them out as well. He had mentioned a film called The Descent, and it almost sort of sounds like it plays very much into this idea that he had. So that would be kind of neat to see, I guess, what could happen with that. It sounds very much like that. Obviously, since it's an original, they're not literally going to label it as that film. But what could come from that is a very similar aesthetic, a very claustrophobic sort of house. My friends on the Rush of Fear podcast mentioned, what if they gave you like a little miner's helmet with a lamp on top and had you walk through a house like that? And I thought, oh, that would be really, really cool. Not sure how that would work in terms of, everybody having a helmet lamp thing. Maybe one person has it and that sort of deal. I don't know. I don't know how it would work. But to me, that sounds like it could be a potentially really cool concept. It's in one of the tent houses, which always lends itself to the more claustrophobic houses, if you will. Everything is very cramped in, very, very tight, and so it could work very well. I could see them having some fun with this. Continuing around, we have The Wicked Growth 2. So this is replacing the Evil Dead house. And so this is like, for me, and for a lot of people, I think it's going to be a sort of two sides of a coin sort of situation. On one hand, it would be awesome to have the Evil Dead at the event, and I was looking forward to the Evil Dead. As soon as I heard about it, I was like, I have to watch it. So I watched it, and I was just crazy over the moon about it. Thought this could make a fabulous house and was very excited. On the other side of this coin, the Wicked Growth Realm of the Pumpkin was pretty much the number one house for fans of the event last year during HHN 30. And so the fact that it could be returning in some form or fashion, just speaks volumes because it was done so well. And perhaps there is just a very high demand for something like this because it was so good. I mean, Universal did a fabulous job with that house, and I'm guessing maybe there's potential to want to expand on this universe of the Wicked Growth. There's been some rumors that maybe we'll see the Pumpkin Lord as the icon for Halloween Horror Nights 31 because, Halloween, is October 31st. This is year 31. He's the Pumpkin Lord. You associate pumpkins with Halloween. I don't think it's too far of a stretch to say that. However, we might not see an icon this year either, and I'm not sure if we would have heard about it by now if there was going to be an icon, but I think that would be really, really neat to see that incorporated into the event. So it works. Wicked Growth 2, it would be one that I think a lot of people would be excited for. But at the same time, like I said, it did replace The Evil Dead, and that was one that I was really itching for. So I'm curious to see what happens with that. Then we have Halloween. So this stayed the same. The next two stayed the same. We have Halloween, and then we have The Weekend. Both of them stayed the same on the spec map. Halloween, I'm hoping that it is going to be based off of the new installments of the franchise. So Halloween from 2018, Halloween Kills, and then Halloween Ends, which will be coming out during Halloween. I'd be interested to see if they featured parts of Halloween Ends into the house. I would be okay with this Halloween. I know one of the things that they said on UUOP was they were, well, some of them, it was sort of a hung jury, if you will. Half of them were like, yes, we would love to see it because we haven't seen it that much. The other half were like, no, it can go. We're tired of it. We've seen it. And, it's basically, if you've seen Halloween several times at the event, if you've been going to the event for a long time, you grow tired of it. If you haven't been going for a long time and this is potentially your first time going, then it's a totally different ballgame. And so for me, I'm excited about Halloween. But as I said, I really would rather it be the new ones that came out because I just feel like they could do a lot with that. There's so much ground they could cover. I mean, just imagine walking into a facade that is Laurie's house out in the middle of the woods, the compound, if you will. I mean, I can see that now, and it looks like I think it's in the same place that Haunting of Hill House was. And it's either where Hill House was or it's where Beetlejuice was. I'm not 100% sure. This one might be where Beetlejuice was. So that could potentially mess things up there. Oh, no. I think it's where Hill House is. It looks like it's changed on both spec maps. It's interesting. But yeah, I would be all for this. I feel like this could be really neat. And if they are doing it on a soundstage or a warehouse, for lack of a better word, they could really build up the sets in here. If it's in the same place that Hill House was, they built the entire Hill House facade there at the front. So who's to say they couldn't literally build Laurie Strode's house in the woods? That have you enter through there, or maybe even enter it and see the burning facade. My mind is racing with the ideas for that. So I would be totally on board with this. I think they could do some really cool stuff with it. And if they were able to sort of incorporate Halloween Ends in some form or fashion, because I'm sure by the time we get to the event, we will have seen a trailer, so we will see little snippets of what happens in the film. I'm sure there's potential to see some of the scenes from the trailer appear in this house too, if they do it that way. That's my prediction, as I hope it is based on the final little entry into the Halloween franchise, just because I think that could be really, really cool. So I hope it stays. So far, this is 2 weeks. It's surviving, so Who knows what could happen or not 2 weeks, but 2 speculation maps. It's surviving so far. But like I said, anything could happen. Then finally, as I said, we have the weekend. This is the exact same as it was before. The only thing that has changed now is it went from being in the Fast and Furious queue to now being, or not the Fast and Furious queue, but a tent that is attached to the Fast and Furious queue. It went from being over there on that side to now being where Beetlejuice was. So because of that, I don't know if that will create any major differences. Obviously, when you have a tent house versus a soundstage house, or a warehouse house, if you will, you can do different things scenically. So it's interesting to see what we're going to get with this. I don't know much about the weekend. I feel like I've heard a song or two by them, and so I'm very curious to see what they will do. I don't hate them. They're just not one that I would listen to frequently. But I do know they have a lot of horror imagery, and for that reason, I feel like they could really do some fun stuff with it. It's, as I said before, it's sort of like what they did with the Billie Eilish house. That never happened, of course. That was supposed to be at HHN 30. It never happened, so I think this is their sort of attempt to still capitalize on that idea for the event. So I'm open to it. I'm curious. I'm intrigued, if nothing else. So I'm very interested to see what they do with this. So I'm down for it. It's not taking a spot of anything that I really cared about. I mean, that has been where it is, and so I'm perfectly cool with it. So I'm curious to see what they do. So we also have, as we said before, we've got the 2 shows. We have Marathon of Mayhem, which will be the Lagoon show. And then the other show is unknown. It is unknown whether or not it's going to be in the old Fear Factor Live Stadium or if it's going to be in one of the other stadiums. Well, really, the only other stadium is the, what do we call it? The Animal Actors Stadium. I suppose if they, well, no, they couldn't do that. I started to say they could do it on the Music Plaza stage, but no, because there's usually a line for a house right out there. There also is potential to do the show in the old Blue Men Group Theater where they did Grinchmas this past Christmas. So there's a couple other locations that they could play with to have another show. I will say that we recently saw that they had taken the sign down for Fear Factor out in front of the Fear Factor Live Stadium. I don't know if this means that demolition is underway or about to begin soon, or if they were just like, just take it down, get it out of the way. So there's no telling where this other show will end up. We can only hope at this point. And then finally, we have the scare zones. We have all but one scare zone unknown. One scare zone is known. The other ones are unknown. And that scare zone is rumored to be in the Central Park area of Universal Studios Orlando. And that is the Scarecrow house. So the rumor is that this has to do with Scarecrow the Reaping, which was a house at HHN 27, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was 27. And phenomenal house from what I've seen. I've watched videos. It has a very similar aesthetic to the Wicked Growth house in a way. And so for that reason, I'm very excited and interested to see how this could play into a scare zone. I think Central Park could be a very good area for it because it has that almost woodsy sort of feel. You could put a lot of corn stalks and whatnot up in there. I'm excited. I think they could have some fun with this. I just hope that it does the justice of the house. I hope it does the house the justice that it deserves because it was such a phenomenal house from what I've seen, from what I've heard, that you don't want to make a scare zone that associates with that and then it'd be like, well, that just wasn't what we were expecting. But yeah, so that is our HHN 31 speculation map for Universal Studios Orlando. We're going to take a short little break, and we're going to talk about the spec map for Universal Studios Hollywood. Don't go anywhere.
Are you looking for more content to listen to? Check out our friends at the New Age Philosophers podcast, featuring our very own co-host, Brooke. Join them as they discuss topics ranging from philosophy, cryptids, conspiracies, and so much more. No topic is off the table. Just remember to keep an open mind, keep discussing, and don't stop thinking. If you're looking for other interesting content, be sure to give our friends at Gather by the Ghostlight a visit. A theatrical experience podcast. Join them as they gather and read stories from a variety of genres around the Ghostlight, your personal campfire. No matter what you are looking for, both are sure to provide you a fun, informative, and entertaining experience. Check them out today and let them know the Terror Talks sent you.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, on this episode of the Terror Talks. Before the break, we were talking about Universal Studios Orlando and their Halloween Horror Nights 31 Speculation Map version 2, released by Horror Night Nightmares. Now we're going to talk about Halloween Horror Nights Hollywood for their 2022 event with Speculation Map version 2 put out by Horror Night Nightmares. So let's just dive right in. So first up, going around, well, I guess this one doesn't necessarily go around the park like the other one. Starting with House A, was rumored to be Universal Monsters The Mummy, has now changed to Candyman. So Candyman, this is going to be located in the Waterworld queue. And this is one that I would be very, very interested to see. Oh, okay. So I'm looking at the spec map here. They've just changed where they are on the spec map, but the locations appear to be relatively the same. So Candyman, this house would be amazing. First off, it is one of the creepiest horror movies I've ever watched in terms of just the aesthetic of who the Candyman is. You know, just the idea of if you say Candyman too many times, then the Candyman might find up and kill you because he's the Candyman. Oh no, I just said it 5 times. I'm dead. It was one that really creeped me out as I watched it. Tony Todd did a phenomenal job in the film. I am hoping that if this is a thing that it is based off of the original and not necessarily the new one. I can't really tell. It looks like the font they used on the spec map might be the new one, which would be a little disappointing to me because I wasn't as big a fan of the new one. But I think it would still be cool to see it at the event. I would love it if they gave it to Orlando and let Orlando have Candyman. But, I mean, just having that house alone would be enough for me to want to head out there to Hollywood. So, Candyman is rumored. Up next, we have The Evil Dead. This was already on here, and the only thing that has changed about this is it is rumored to be in the Walking Dead building. So, that would mean that we are not going to see Walking Dead at Hollywood. Thank the Lord. It's a miracle. But that is a difference from where it was before because it was speculated to be in the Waterworld queue before, but now it is speculated to be in the Walking Dead maze area. Up next, we have La Llorona, which was rumored to be in the Parisian Courtyard. It still is, so that has not changed at all. That is still the same, so good on that. Then we have Scarecrow, which the only thing we can assume is that this is based off of the Scarecrow the Reaping house that Universal Studios Orlando did. That's the only thing we have to go off of at this time. It is located in the same place. We've seen a lot of facade work being done on this house, and it looks stunning, the facade for this, assuming it is the same one. So I'd be very interested to see what we get with that. Then we have An American Werewolf in London. This was one that was featured at the Orlando event in 25, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. It was featured twice at the Orlando event, so they brought it back. And this is actually taking the location of The Weeknd. So on Spec Map 1, The Weeknd was rumored to be in the Curious George tent 2. But now this is rumored to be in that tent. So right next to the rumored Scarecrow house is where this would be. Now we have Universal Monsters, and they have gone from calling it Universal Monsters The Mummy. They are now going with Universal Monsters The Mummy versus the Wolfman, much like we have in Orlando. And they throw in a little extra thing at the bottom of it with music by Slash. So yes, Slash has been known to do many soundtracks for houses at the Universal Studios Hollywood Park for the HHN event, and it's always amazing. We talked about it on the show when I had Gabe and Nikki from the Theme Park Duo podcast. Go check them out. We discussed Slash doing the music and discussed Universal Hollywood needs to release the music that he's done in an album form because it is that good. So that would be really, really cool. So again, it is in the same place it already was, the Mummy Queue, and we have seen the facade sort of going up. Interestingly enough, the facade is not quite looking how I expected. For a while there, everyone was rumoring that facade was meant to look like the Museum of Antiquities from the Mummy, and for a minute there, everything looked like, yes, that's it. That's what's going to be. But now that there's been some texturing, the wall now it's made of brick essentially, and it does not match what that looks like anymore. So I'm curious what it's going to be, if that's going to remain true, or if that simple change in scenery, it will change basically the rumor entirely. So who knows? Then we have The Weeknd taking the place of Nope, which was rumored to be on Soundstage 29. Now The Weeknd House is rumored to be on Soundstage 29. Interesting that both The Weeknd in Hollywood and The Weeknd in Orlando got moved from tent houses to sound stages. So I'm wondering if this is if there's a reason for this. I'm assuming that, for one thing, because they're probably going to play The Weeknd's music throughout the house, maybe they wanted to sort of keep that self-contained in the soundstage, perhaps. One thing I can guess, I suppose. I'm not entirely sure, to be quite honest, but I feel like there's some significance there to the fact that they have both been moved into sound stages on both coasts. And as we've talked about many times, it is all but confirmed, but pretty much is confirmed at this point, that The Weeknd is going to indeed be at this event, because they have put out several posts, and the amount of posts are basically pointing to, yes, there will be a Weeknd house featured. So it's going to be interesting. Again, I'm very curious to see what that will entail. And, I'm excited. I know Universal will do a great job. They typically do. Then we have Killer Clowns from Outer Space 2. Very interesting that both spec maps have a house on them and puts like 2 on it for that particular house, because it's not there is no sequel to Killer Clowns. But what we can only speculate is that it is going to feature scenes that you wouldn't have necessarily seen the first time with this house when it was featured at the event. Interestingly enough, though, we lost Killer Clowns it was supposed to be in the Walking Dead location, which was already amazing in and of itself, because that meant, maybe we'll see some things that we didn't see before, like we'll see Clownzilla, and we'll be able to build up the sets, that sort of deal. Well, now they are rumoring it to be behind Soundstage 29, which, funny enough, was something that me and Gabe and Nikki talked about on episode 4 of the show, where we broke down version 1 of the spec map. He had mentioned that someone had told him that there was a house that was going to be behind Soundstage 29, and he was like, what? No way. And now, looking at the spec map, it's like, oh my God, maybe there will be one behind Soundstage 29. So that is very interesting to say in and of itself. Who would have thought? I guess we were right, or we were wrong, and that person was right. Then finally we have the Terror Tram Hollywood Harry. Wait a minute, what's this? Oh yeah, that's right. There's 9 houses this year at HHN Hollywood. This, I believe, would be a record of sorts, so I consider the Terror Tram a house. So, yeah, they're planning on having 9 houses, just one short of the 10 that Universal Orlando usually has. So Hollywood is about to catch up and almost be, in line with Universal Orlando. The only thing they're missing is 2 scare zones and another show, and a different show, I might add. But yeah, so they're going to have the Terror Tram. Hollywood Harry is the theme. Terror Tram's such a unique thing to Universal Studios Hollywood. So lucky that they have that. So unlucky that we in Orlando do not have that. But yeah, the scare zones are still, all 3 are unknown. Maybe we'll see the addition of a scare zone. I mean, now we're starting to see these additions of other things. Maybe in the Jurassic World area, we might see a scare zone. Maybe in Hogsmeade, I've said it before, Death Eaters, that could potentially be a scare zone. Who knows? The shows at this point is the Jabberwockies, which we heard Gabe and Nikki's thoughts on that. Not very thrilled about the Jabberwockies being there again, but it is what it is. So that is it. That is the Universal Studios Halloween Horror Nights spec maps for both Universal Studios Hollywood and Universal Studios Orlando. Both are shaping up to be interesting events. I would say I am not as excited about version 2 as I was about version 1. So I'm very curious to see what we get with version 3, version 4, and I believe after version 4 typically comes the final spec map. So I'm very curious to see what changes we get. I'm still not thoroughly convinced that Horror Night Nightmares is not messing with us, because they did that for HHN 30. They mentioned a house, but then they were like, yeah, we're not going to tell you what it is. We're going to make you guess for it. So I'm thinking they might be sort of getting into a mood like Universal where they just want to kind of screw with you a little bit. So I'm very, very excited to see what we get. But that is going to do it for us today here on the Terror Talks. I have been your host, Jeremy. We've been talking all about the speculation maps by Horror Night Nightmares for Halloween Horror Nights Orlando and Halloween Horror Nights Florida. If you enjoyed the show today, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Let us know what you liked, what you didn't like. Let us know what you want to hear, what you don't want to hear. We're open to all suggestions. We want to hear from you guys. You help make the show what it is. You can reach out to us at theterrortalks@gmail.com. Send us an email. Anything you want to share with us, we want to hear from you guys. We love to hear from you guys. We love reading your thoughts on the show. Just reaching out to us, it means the absolute world to us. Be sure to go follow us on all of our social medias. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, TikTok. I think that's all of them. We're on all of those. You can go check out our website. That is also linked in the description below. Also, we have a new feature now where you can give us a one-time donation. We are asking you for a one-time donation. That's all it is. One-time donation of $3. That is it. You give us that $3 one time, and that goes directly into the show. 100% of the donations that you give us will return to the show. If you feel like you want to be extra generous, you can give more than $3. We do have the option for that. But all we are asking you is a $3 minimum donation. And all of that helps us go into making more content, paying our bills, keeping the lights on here so that we can continue to make more content. Be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. We are literally everywhere. All those locations are down in the description below. Be sure to go check out our friends over at the unofficial Universal Orlando podcast, the Rush of Fear podcast, the Theme Park Duo podcast, the New Age Philosophers podcast, and Gather by the Ghost Light. All of those are fantastic shows. We check them out all the time. We support them. We hope that you will support them and go check them out as well and let them know that the Terror Talk sent you. Finally, we want to thank you guys for being such a fabulous audience. We could not do it without you. So thank you so much for doing what you do and joining us every time we put out a new episode. So until next time, be safe out there. Don't text and drive. And be excellent to each other. We'll see you in the fog.